You think you'd see it coming. The knife. After 18 years, you tell yourself you'd feel the cold before the blade. But I didn't. I sat there in that glass-walled boardroom staring at faces I'd once trusted with my life, as they voted me out, one by one, hand by hand, eye after averted eye, no discussion, no argument, just a quiet, efficient execution. Then came the final blow. The chairman who used to toast with me after every annual report cleared his throat and said, "It's not personal, Graham, it's business." I didn't speak, not a single word. Because what could I say that wouldn't tear the whole room in half? I'm Graham West. I was the chief operating officer of Langston and Bright, the backbone behind every strategy, every expansion, every single percentage point in market share we celebrated like a Super Bowl win. I wasn't the face of the company, I was its spine. And now apparently it's dead weight. They replaced me with a 34-year-old, Tyler Cartwright, the CEO's son-in-law, MBA from somewhere flashy, smile sharp enough to cut through paper. Charisma? Sure. But beneath it? Nothing. No substance. No scars from the long nights. No stories about pulling deals back from the brink. When the vote ended, my so-called friend Elliot Monroe couldn't even meet my eyes. Elliot. We started. In the same damn cubicles back in '06, he was the numbers guy, I was the people guy. Together we kept this place alive through 2 market crashes and 1 hostile takeover. He adjusted his tie, stared at his notes, and said nothing. But Tessa Raymond, my executive assistant for the past 9 years, didn't hide it. Her lips were tight, her eyes wet. She whispered, "You don't deserve this," as I stood to leave. I just nodded. I didn't trust my voice enough to answer. Walking out felt surreal. The same hallway I used to own suddenly felt unfamiliar. My footsteps echoed like I was already a ghost in the building. I passed the marketing floor. A few heads turned, but nobody said a word. Like I was already gone. Outside, the winter wind hit me like a slap. I didn't zip up my coat, didn't feel the cold. All I could think about was the years I gave up. Birthdays I missed. Weekends I buried under reports. Vacations I canceled, so we could meet quarterly targets. I kept asking myself, how long had this been planned? When did they stop seeing me as a builder and start seeing me as a block to be removed? The answer came quicker than I wanted, probably the moment Tyler married the CEO's daughter. That's when the chessboard started shifting, and I, the loyal knight, became expendable. But here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't end with silence. It grows roots. It waits. And I wait well, as I stood by the sidewalk staring up at the building I helped build floor by floor, brick by brick. My phone buzzed, unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something, instinct, maybe, made me answer, and that phone call. That call changed everything. Loyalty doesn't die in a day. It erodes, like rust under polished chrome. You don't see it until the whole thing breaks in your hands. I joined Langston and Bright when it was still 3 guys and a dying office lease. The place was bleeding out. No cash, no clients, no plan. I wasn't recruited, I volunteered. Back then, I was young, hungry, and maybe a little foolish. I flew coach to every meeting, sometimes paid for my own hotel rooms when the company card bounced. I worked weekends, slept on couches, skipped Thanksgiving to close a logistics deal that saved our first product launch. There was no clock in, clock out. Langston was my life, and for a long time that sacrifice paid off. Every quarter, we climbed. I started leading operations, streamlining teams, building supplier relationships, turning our chaos into something that looked like a real company. Dean Harrington, the CEO, used to say, "You're the engine under the hood, Graham. No one sees it, but we don't move without you." I believed him, God help me. I really did. But now, looking back, that praise was always hollow. Dean, he was charming, sure. Tight suits, tighter smiles. But underneath it, he was a chess player, always 4 moves ahead, always making sure someone else took the fall. He never saw me as a partner, just a reliable cog. And when a younger, shinier gear came along, Miles Landon. I remember the first time I met him. It was a networking dinner. Dean introduced him casually. "This is Miles, my daughter's fiancé." Tall guy, perfect hair, flashy watch. That overconfident kind of handshake that tries too hard to dominate. He said something like, "I've heard a lot about you, Mr. West. Dean says you're the real fixer behind the curtain." I smiled, told him, "Just doing what needs to be done." But even then, something felt off. Over the next few months, Miles started showing up in places he didn't belong, sitting in on marketing reviews, asking questions in finance briefings. Once he actually corrected a supply chain model and got it wrong. I pulled Dean aside afterward and said, "What exactly is Miles's role here?" Dean just chuckled and waved it off. "He's just curious, wants to learn the ropes, you know how it is with family." I didn't say what I wanted to. Curiosity doesn't get you a front row seat in C-level meetings, but I bit my tongue. Out of respect. Out of loyalty. Then, there was Lisa, Dean's daughter, Miles's wife now. Polite, quiet, smart, frighteningly so. She never made waves, but she always watched, always processed. If Miles was the chess piece, Lisa was the one moving him. I should have seen it sooner. Emails started going unanswered. Meetings got rescheduled without explanation. Budget proposals I sent were suddenly still under review. At first I told myself I was just paranoid, burned out, reading too much into things, but one night, it all cracked a little. Elliot and I went out for drinks, and nothing unusual. Just two old colleagues grabbing a scotch after a brutal quarter. We were sitting at the wharf, corner booth, low light, the kind of place where executives go to pretend they're off the clock. He seemed tense, fidgety, barely touched his drink. I asked, "What's on your mind, Elliot?" He looked down, then said quietly, "Sometimes it's the ones closest to you holding the knife." I laughed, thinking it was a metaphor for his own team, but he didn't laugh back. He just stared into his glass. I should have pressed him, but instead, I changed the subject, because deep down, I already knew what he meant. I just wasn't ready to admit it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept running back through the past year like rewinding security footage. Miles. The way he kept inserting himself into my projects. The time he accidentally forwarded my private report to the board. Lisa, always standing behind him, never saying much, but always present. Dean, slowly pulling away, praising me less, delegating more, and Elliot, always loyal, always by my side, but suddenly quiet. The pieces started fitting together. Favoritism. Silence. Whispers I never caught. Board members suddenly hard to reach. But one question kept burning through all of it. Why now? Why this moment? There had to be something I didn't know yet. Something bigger than office politics and nepotism, and I was going to find it, even if I had to tear the whole damn place apart. Betrayal doesn't always come with a bang. Sometimes it's just a quiet ringtone in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. Sometimes the truth doesn't scream. It whispers. And that whisper changes everything. It had been a week since the boardroom vote. 7 long days. I hadn't answered a single message from anyone at Langston and Bright. Didn't check my email, didn't show up to clean out my office. I just stopped. But that Thursday around 3:40 p.m., my phone rang. No caller ID. Normally I'd ignore it, but something in me said answer it, so I did. The voice was quiet, almost shaky. "Graham? It's Sandra. Sandra Tran." It took me a second. Sandra had been in HR for years. Sharp, calm, the kind of person who remembered birthdays even when the calendar didn't. I'd gone to bat for her during the pandemic layoffs. Told the board we couldn't afford to lose someone who actually gave a damn about people. They kept her. Barely. She owed me nothing. But that day, she gave me everything. She said, "I probably shouldn't be calling, But I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I asked, "What is it?" Her next words dropped like ice down my spine. "I was in the audit committee's office months ago. They didn't know I was on the call list. I heard your name." Over and over, she paused. "They were planning it, Graham. Your exit, since last year." I didn't say anything. I just let the silence hang. Because deep down, I already knew. Sandra kept going. Emails were flying between Dean and legal. HR was told to start drafting transition scenarios. They wanted Miles in that seat from the beginning. Your evaluations, your reports, all of it was used to soften the structure, make it look like the change was organizational and not personal. She told me she copied what she could. Internal memos, version-controlled drafts, confidential. Prep decks from board strategy sessions, all marked "Do Not Distribute." She didn't send them through company servers. She printed them and mailed them. "I just thought you should know," she said. Then she added something that stuck with me. "They tried to make you invisible, Graham. But not everyone forgot who built this place." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at nothing. I didn't cry, didn't rage. I just breathed. 2 days later, a manila envelope arrived. No return address. Inside, a stack of papers that felt heavier than any contract I'd ever signed. Reading through it, the pattern became clear. Dean had started planning my removal the day Miles got engaged to Lisa. The engagement announcement was in one of the footers, time-stamped. A month later, I was told to mentor emerging leaders for a future-facing structure. That program, it was designed to build a team loyal to Miles, not me. The audits I was pushed to run, framed as streamlining, but they were gathering data, ammo for the board to claim I was inefficient at scale. Memos phrased it perfectly. "Graham's operational methods are deeply tied to legacy systems. We need a face for the next generation." It wasn't a coup. It was a slow, silent execution, with my own hands holding the blueprint. And then I saw the legal document, a rider in my updated contract from last year, language buried deep, masked in jargon. It gave the board power to reallocate C-suite responsibilities during fiscal recalibration periods without notice. I remembered that day. Margot Flynn, the firm's legal advisor, handed it to me before a quarterly meeting. "Just standard housekeeping," she said. "Everyone's signing it." I didn't question it. I signed it during the meeting. Because I trusted them. Because I was too damn loyal to read the fine print. I felt sick. Not because they tricked me, but because they knew I'd never look. Lyle Bennett. Another name that suddenly burned in my memory. He was always so supportive. Always clapping. A little too hard at my presentations. Always saying things like, "You're the soul of this company, Graham. Don't ever change." Now I saw him differently. He wasn't an ally. He was the decoy. The smokescreen. While Dean and Miles built their exit plan behind my back, Lyle was there to keep me blind. You'd think I'd be furious, but I wasn't. Anger is loud. Revenge. Whispers. And I knew exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't going to rant online. I wasn't going to beg for reinstatement. I wasn't going to leak memos to the press. No, I was going to take my time, dismantle what they built, brick by brick. And I'd make sure they saw every single piece fall, because when someone robs you of your legacy, you don't scream. You rebuild. Stronger, smarter, and quieter. They thought they buried me, but I wasn't a seed. I was the storm they never saw coming. Revenge isn't rage. It's not slamming fists or shouting down the walls. Real revenge is quiet. It looks like patience. It sounds like planning. And it moves. Like shadow. Sandra agreed. To meet at a small cafe off 3rd and Lawson. No suits, no briefcases, just two people sitting across from each other. Like this wasn't the start of something that would change everything. She slid a black envelope across the table. No words, just a nod. Inside, screenshots, emails, printed memos. Names I hadn't seen in months, all tied to one thing. My exit. They fired me 2 weeks ago, she said softly. stirring her coffee like she was discussing the weather. No press release, no announcement, just security escort to the elevator. I asked why she risked giving me all this. Sandra didn't hesitate. Because I saw you bleed for that place, and because no one else will fight for what's right, unless someone makes the first move. That night I digitized everything. Every file, every timestamp. I organized it the same way I used to run crisis ops, methodically, silently, without emotion. Then I picked up my phone and made 3 calls. The first was to Dominic Rourke. Years ago, Dominic was an early investor in Langston and Bright. He almost lost everything in a market crash, until I stepped in, reworked his shares, gave him options, and earned his loyalty. When, he answered, his voice cracked with surprise. Graham, I thought you vanished. I told him I was working on something important. He didn't even ask what it was, he just said, whatever you need. The second call was Jade Chen. She'd been a junior systems engineer in our earliest days. Brilliant, overlooked, and underestimated. I gave her her first team. She now runs her own cybersecurity firm, lean, lethal, and loyal. She laughed when I told her I needed some digital muscle. Is this about Miles? She asked. I didn't say yes. Didn't need to. She said, send me everything. The third call was Tessa, my old assistant. Fiercely loyal, sharper than anyone ever gave her credit for. She answered on the first ring. You finally ready? She asked. I asked, to do what? She didn't miss a beat. To take it all back. I paused, then said, yeah, let's begin. The first domino was subtle. An anonymous tip to a handful of private investors, highlighting misuse of discretionary budgets, signed off by Miles. Nothing flashy, just enough to stir questions. Then Jade dug in. She found something gold. Miles's big keynote, the one he presented at last quarter's tech summit, entire paragraphs lifted from a decade-old pitch by a South Korean startup. Word for word, we sent it to a mid-tier tech blog, one with just enough reach to catch attention but not enough to scream sabotage. Headline read, Plagiarized or Coincidence? New CEO's speech mirrors 2011 patent pitch. Comments exploded. Credibility cracked. Then came the leak. Tessa fed Amelia Cartwright, a journalist I'd once helped during a whistleblower case, a lead Amelia owed me, and she delivered. Digging through old acquisitions, she found falsified projections. From a Dean-era buyout, numbers tweaked just enough to convince the board. Now, years later, the cracks were showing, and the press smelled blood. Meanwhile, Ravi Singh, a data analyst Miles fired 6 months ago for cost-cutting, reached out. He'd built backdoor models tracking financial flows. When I asked why he did it, he said, because I knew they'd screw you, and because I don't forget who fought for the nerds. Ravi found transfers to shell vendors, fake invoices, offshore accounts, all signed off under Miles's credentials. With Jade's help, we traced the IP trails, screenshot everything, and packaged it into a single file. I named it Inheritance. A week later, I found out about a private investor dinner. High-rise rooftop, catered, champagne flowing. I wasn't invited. But I didn't need an invitation. I showed up wearing a calm smile, suit crisp, shoulders loose, like I had nothing to prove, and everything to remember. Miles spotted me first. He was halfway through a joke when he froze. The room turned. He put on that smirk, the same one from the boardroom. Graham, he said, loud enough for the nearby guests. I thought you'd retired. I smiled back, easy. Just reconnecting with old friends. He tried to bait me with questions, asked about my next steps, if I was planning a tell-all. I just laughed. Telling stories was always Dean's job, I said. Me? I build foundations. Then I handed a small branded USB drive to one of the investors. Dominic. No explanation, just a pat on the shoulder. No pressure, just some reading for later. And I left. Over the next few weeks, things started to shift. Investors stopped responding to Dean's calls. Departments began whispering. Emails accidentally CC'd to the wrong people. Legal inquiries quietly arrived from the SEC. Blogs speculated. Journals started publishing. But I wasn't done. Sandra called me one morning. Her voice was tight. "You need to see the shareholder registry," she said. Dominic and I had been buying up minor stakes through shadow firms. Not enough to trigger alerts, but enough to build weight. Jade even wrote a script to monitor fluctuations. We were getting close enough to call a vote. But I didn't want revenge that just burned everything down. I wanted it structured, precise, unmistakable. I wanted control. So we partnered. With a rival firm, a competitor Dean had once humiliated in a deal negotiation. They bought in silently. I didn't even meet their CEO, just traded signatures through lawyers. Suddenly, I was no longer a ghost. I was a shareholder, a player. Back at the table, we scheduled an emergency board meeting. Dean tried to cancel it. Too late. The night before, I called Tessa. Told her, "You ready?" She replied, "For your speech or his funeral?" I said, "Same difference." Then I hung up and slept better than I had in months. I won't lie. Walking back into that boardroom, the same room where they stripped me down to nothing, it felt like reclaiming my name from the grave. Dean was already seated, Miles beside him, pale and twitchy. Lyle avoided eye contact. I took the seat across from them, calm, unfolded a single sheet of paper. I didn't read from it, I just placed it on the table. It was a motion to remove Dean Harrington and Miles Landon from executive positions. Filed legally, backed by a supermajority of voting shareholders. No screaming, no speeches, just facts and signatures. Dean looked at me, eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake," he said. I replied, "You already did." They left in silence. No goodbyes, no drama, just the quiet sound of falling empires, and me, still standing. You can smell fear in a boardroom. It's not sweat or panic, it's silence. Heavy, unnatural silence. Like everyone already knows the tide has turned, but no one dares to say it. That morning, I walked through the same glass doors they once shut behind me. Only this time, they opened wide. Same boardroom, same long table, same seats with little brass plaques no one really earned. Dean was already there, leaning back in his chair like he still owned the air. He looked up when I walked in, and for a second, he didn't move. His face didn't show anger, just confusion. Like a king waking up to find the gates already unlocked. Miles sat beside him, tapping on his phone. Still smug, still clueless. He barely looked up. I didn't raise my voice, didn't pound the table. I just laid the folder down and said, "Let's begin." They tried to interrupt. Dean said something about protocol. Miles muttered about legal advisors needing to be present. But I kept talking. Every sentence sharpened by a year of betrayal. Laid out every move they made, the fake audits, the offshore accounts, the plagiarized speech, the signed approvals under Miles's name. Then I looked around the table, one by one, and I said, "Everyone in this room made a choice. Not all of you spoke, but silence is a choice." I opened the folder and read from the final page. A motion, simple, precise, effective immediately. Dean Harrington and Miles Landon will be removed from their executive roles. Interim leadership to be assigned pending permanent vote. The room held its breath. And then, Elliot spoke. First time in months. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like glass. He looked straight at Dean and said, "You forgot who taught you to build empires. You taught him to build one too." No one spoke after that. The vote went around the table. Hands raised, eyes low, majority passed. No contest. Security was already waiting outside. Dean didn't argue, didn't plead. He stood slowly, and for the first time since I met him, he looked small. Miles didn't even look up. He just sat there, hands limp, staring at the wall. As they were escorted out, I walked beside them, not ahead, not behind, just beside. At the elevator, Dean finally turned and asked, "Was this really worth it?" I looked at him and said, "I didn't want revenge. I wanted them to remember who I was when it was too late to apologize." And then the doors closed. I didn't take the CEO chair. Never wanted it. Instead, I handed it to Sandra and Jade, two women the board once ignored. Now they'd lead the company I once bled for, and I'd make damn sure no one ever forgot how they got there. As I left the building, I looked back once. Same steel, same glass, but something was different. This time, it belonged to people who earned it. And me? I wasn't walking away empty. I was walking away whole. The ocean doesn't care who you used to be. It just keeps moving. Forward, always forward. I walked along the coastline that morning, wind brushing against my face, salt in the air, peace in my chest. No boardrooms, no suits, just waves, steady, honest. For 18 years, I built someone else's dream, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. I gave more than they ever asked. And when I was no longer convenient, they replaced me like a cog. But here's the thing about being the one who built the system. You know exactly where to pull and when to walk away. I'm not angry anymore, not bitter, just clear. Tessa once told me, "You didn't lose your legacy, you just outgrew theirs." She was right. Now I get to build something real, something mine. With people who remember what loyalty used to mean, because betrayal hurts most when it's dressed in trust. But nothing is more powerful than the silence of a man who was underestimated and chose not to scream, but to rebuild from the ground up, wiser and free.